Baby, you are gonna go broke showing turkeys like these.
Now we're talking turkey.
Gobble, gobble, motherfucker.
It's turkey time. Gobble, gobble.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Let's Talk Turkeys. I'm your host, Movie Miss, and my co-host, Drive-In Dave, is off this week. And I am bringing you this Patreon exclusive episode. We're going to deviate from our usual format, and this is an interview episode. And I am pleased to have joining me today, filmmaker and author, Fred Terling. Hello, sir. How are you today?
Okay, how are you?
I'm doing
Pleasure
well.
to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to talk to you because the last time we had a chat, you were on the Dead Silence episode. And then we also did a small interview portion with you later as a bonus, talking a little bit about your writing. But for this episode, I thought we could just completely focus, no other movie, just focus on you and what you do.
Okay.
And so before we dive into your works, if we could just give the listeners a little taste of you, I thought I would ask you some simple questions like, what is it that turns you on with film? What do you enjoy watching and learning about? You like scary movies, I know that. But what else do you like to spend your time when you're not working yourself on film or writing? What do you like to watch and enjoy and do with your time?
I'm pretty much isolated to three things. I play Star Trek Online and Elder Scrolls Online daily. The only thing I watch on TV anymore is murder shows, true crime. The grisly, the better. I really like the ones specifically from the UK. Those folks tend to do some, I mean, we have Dahmer, we have Bundy, Gacy, we have the big three. But the cool things about the UK is because we live in America and we're isolated, we don't hear about these other folks, and they do some pretty really nasty things. I don't know why I'm attracted to this. I went to a seminar that was packed and sold out a month ago in a nearby town. It was a lecture by Dr. Tolles, and she's one of the foremost experts on serial killers. And I was one of the only men in the auditorium. For some reason, this topic overwhelmingly appeals. Like 86% of the fan base of true crime is female. So I was kind of surprised by that, but it was a really, really interesting presentation she made, and she has her own theory on these steps that people go through to sort of become serial killers. And I thought it was really illuminating. So I like to learn that kind of stuff.
Well, you say it appeals mostly to women. Did your wife turn you on to this true crime stuff? Is she a fan, or did you just gravitate toward it on your own?
Oh, no, I've been reading about this stuff forever.
Okay. So film, you're saying you don't watch much film. You don't get out to the movies?
No, what I watch is on pretty much every... I don't come off of Monster TV. I like Monster TV. I like the classics. I like horror hosts. The campier and cornier, the better. It's fun. I love Zombo. Zombo is awesome. Some of them are they're too corny and tacky, and they're really difficult to watch, and I hate when they interrupt. But Lord Bloodraw, he's good. But they run horror hosts all day long, 24 hours a day. And I like to watch the old movies. And I mean, that's what I grew up with, and that's what I like. I think we talked about me sort of hitting the end of the road when we did the Dead Silence episode with Hollywood and the junk that they're putting out. It's just so formulaic and so predictable, and the characters are cardboard. And even when I do find a movie that I like The Monster Project. I watched that recently I think it was on Amazon Prime. So it was a more recent film. I'm addicted to the first person flicks. This one was interesting. It was cool. They were going into this. They had rented this house, and the concept was they were actually seeking people who claimed they were real monsters. So there was a demon, a vampire, and a skinwalker, and they had locked themselves in the house. And we're going to do this series of interviews like you're doing now, except they were in person, except they really were a vampire, skinwalker, and a demon. But all of the main characters are kind of despicable. I didn't like any of them. So when they all meet their inevitable end, you're happy. But it was really well done. I don't know how they did the special effects, because each of the monsters were superlative. And it was an indie film. I don't even remember who produced it, but it was good. I enjoyed it.
Nice. Okay. Well, I remember chatting with you about Hammer horror
Yeah, I love
and
Hammer.
how you're a big fan of the older, yeah, that stuff. So let's talk about your film
Okay.
from 2013.
When it released in 2014, that's when we started early in
Wow.
2013. Yes.
It was called Croaker, and I would love to know how you got the idea, the concept for it, and then take me through briefly getting it to the screen, the process.
Sure.
All right, you all know the drill. Why does he look like that? I want to tell you a story about Cookers.
This is Macy Patterson with the Jimmy Star Show News. We are here today in front of the Canonsburg Borough Building. Over the past few weeks, local residents have monitored the area and noticed that once again, the levels are on the rise.
I got 4 corpus selectis in the past 2 days.
Cause of death?
Sudden cardiac death?
So what you're trying to tell me is this urban legend is haunting this town?
Most legends start as true stories. Go ahead and make fun. I'm ready for my next encounter.
Frogs aren't waist high. Get in the mind of your enemy.
Rookies.
Look, I got an idea. Instead of sitting in your kitchen looking like a Make-A-Wish goalie, let's go down to the creek.
You know, Kate, I'm gonna kick your ass one of these days.
You're the murderer. There's no monster out there. Where are you? When?
I was working. Well, I wasn't working. There were 2 other gentlemen and myself had. There was a single screen theater called the Hollywood Theater, and it had closed down. And we had worked to get it reopened. And we had reopened it as a nonprofit. We had met a couple of investors from Canada who came down and were interested in the theater initially, but they kind of blew it up, and that's why it closed down. But of these 2 guys, the one I met, and I won't mention his name because he's gotten into some trouble, he took me to dinner one night, and he's like, well, why don't you write a film? And I thought to myself, I've been writing films since I was a kid. They just sit dusty on my hard drive. So he said, if you write this, I know people, we can probably get a modest budget for it and get it made, but write it from that perspective so that we can shoot it for about $200,000. So I said, okay, well, I can do that. What sells, if we're going to do this? So the idea was that they had a couple of picture deal with then, I don't even know if it's still around, Spike TV. And this was going to be one of the films that they were going to put on. So he said, go to where you were when you were young, the things that you can touch and feel. And he asked me a bunch of questions. What did you do when you were young? So we went through this whole Q&A session. He's like, okay, go back now as an adult and look on those people, places, and things and touch them, make them tangible again, and link your feelings to them. How did it make you feel? And let the story unwind. So I did that because he said, that makes it original because nobody else has this experience but you. So go ahead and do it. I learned a lot from him, even though he's gotten into some trouble. So I wrote this story, and I needed a monster because, as you mentioned, I love Hammer films. I love the films from the 70s. I'm talking creature features, monsters. So I took a look at those films and said, okay, let's see what is a commonality in these films. The protagonist is always a straight up, normal, kind of even boring white guy. He just is. And everything around him is crazy. There's an overzealous sheriff. No matter how much evidence points towards the alien or the monster or the bad guy, he's convinced that this straight up lily white guy who's a nerd, dorky scientist type is the actual killer. So there's 2 characters right there.
They write themselves, it sounds like.
Right. Got to have a love interest. There's always a really, really pretty, sexy love interest. So I kind of pick and choose from it. And I even went into like the comic relief. There's whether it's 1 or 2 guys, I picked 2 younger guys and I just wrote it that way. So it focuses on these 4 people and their story with this creature. The Vodnik is the one I settled on. which is a creature out of Slavic mythology. And the reason I went with Croaker is the turning point of the movie. The main character is having flashbacks with one of his friends who died, but they were having this intimate childhood moment where they find this dead body. And the thing that brings everything in the entire movie into perspective, he tells them this story about croakers, specifically tadpoles, and how tadpoles lose their tails and they become frogs and they come out of the water and they're amphibious. And, so there's this sort of evolution of humanity that happens with all of us to where we think we're one thing, then we become another, and we become better than we were, and we can be multifaceted. We can live in a pond or we can jump around on the grass, but we're no longer tadpoles. We're not relying on the water and swimming and whatever else. So this is kind of the turning point of the film, and that's why I called it Croaker. And it's also my favorite scene. Those two kids knocked it out of the park. I mean, everybody it was filming broke out into tears and was really moved by the way that these two kids delivered the lines. It was a really great moment.
It's not just a creature feature. It's deep. There's some meaning in there.
Yeah, everything I do is that. I mean, even my novels are, as I get deeper and deeper into the series, it's harder and harder to classify. Because when I first did the first one, and I know you want to talk about this later, but I'm going to tie it in real quick here. The first one is fairly horror and action adventure, but they're character studies. The second book is all character study with this other stuff. So it drifts into a different genre almost. But that was my thing. I've been a writer since fourth grade, and I've made a living being a writer, and I still do. Writing everything from marketing fluff. I wrote newspaper columns. I even wrote for a National Hockey League. But I always, when I wrote those shorter pieces, the 500 to 750 word, one pagers, I was always able to integrate this. I don't know. I call it Fredness. It's this very soft, open-hearted sweetness into whatever the piece was. It didn't matter what I was writing about. I wanted the reader to feel what I was feeling when I described it. And I really held off writing novels simply because I didn't know if I could ever do that in 300 pages. That's a lot to hold up. But screenplays are different because you write the dialogue. The more descriptors you put in there, the worse the script is, because the script is just basically something you're handing actors. It's up for the directors and the cinematographers and the line producers to take a look at the script and decide, okay, we're going to board this now. This is what it's going to look like when the actors show up and put on the set. And the actors are looking for you to guide them because, they've read the lines and they know the lines and they have interpreted it their own way. But it may or may not reflect the overall story arc, the connecting scene story arc, or all of this other stuff because I wrote it. So I know what I wanted to do with it.
Was that fun for you to take that role as a director on your own film, to have to direct everyone like that?
No, that's why it was my first and last film. The first thing that you learn as an independent film director, all the people who said that they were going to pitch in and help evaporate before first day of shooting. So I ended up on one of the cameras. I ended up wearing 16 different hats and not completely focusing and relying on the direction. I had actors that were exceptional. I had actors that were awful. I had actors that didn't get any better. So when that happens, you're working on a $15,000 budget, because it was quite smaller than what these guys had promised me, because, well, when they read the script, they wanted me to take my female lead, who is probably the anchor and the strong person in the film, and they wanted me to dumb her down, throw in a shower scene. Yeah, they wanted to see titties and ass. They wanted a love scene in there, and I'm like, this girl is Miss Pennsylvania. She's going for Miss Universe. I'm not going to ask her to do this stuff. So I kept true to what I want. So they were like, well, that's too bad. Then we're not going to do this. And then I had another guy who approached me who was local. He was an investor. He actually came to the table. Hold your breath. This happened. He came to the table with $2 million.
Whoa.
And what they wanted to do is they wanted the Pennsylvania tax break. Pennsylvania is very, very lucrative for filmmakers. They give a huge tax benefit in the way of tax credits. I don't understand how all of it works because I'm not a financier. But, the way he explained it to me, and he gave me a Blu-ray of a film that they did, and I forget who was in it. It was, it got greenlit. It ended up on a Blu-ray. It was a Hollywood film with major actors in it. And they wanted to do the same thing with Croker. But, he kept, but, you'll be in charge, but we're going to show it to a, screening group. If they don't like it, we're going to have to go back and recut it. All the people that you hired already, you're going to have to let go. You're going to fire them. Everything that you have, and we kind of had some in the can, but not a lot. We'll take it from here, but you're in charge. And then we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but you're in charge. They're going to do this, we're going to do that. And it just became a thing where, honestly, maybe I'm a sucker. I didn't want to screw the people over who had already come on board.
Also, it sounds like they would have compromised your initial vision as well.
Well, whatever that was, $2 million, $2 million. But
screw the vision.
but yeah, exactly. But if I didn't have the cast and I didn't put in all this time recruiting all these people and have some of it put in the can, I might have went for it. But that was not going to happen. So my morality kicked in, and I was like, I discussed this with Lori, and she said, well, why are you doing this? Like, why are you making this movie? And I said, well, I kind of wanted to get a bunch of people together, put them into a dream machine for a summer, mix it up and see what happens. Because we watch them. We watch so many of these independent horror films, and they're like hideous. And I was like, if I had a couple of $1,000, I bet I can do better than this. So that was kind of the thought process. And all these kind of weird things fell into place, like with Valerie. I mean, she just walked in. She didn't even audition for me. I had cast the girl to play Emma, young Emma, because the story is kind of in two parts. There's kids, and then it's 30 years later, and they're grown up.
Right.
So I casted Emma, and Emma had this really unique look, and she had these blue eyes, and she had a really unique facial structure, and she was a little girl. And Valerie just walked in one day to this talent agency, and I saw her, and I tapped Marty on the shoulder, and I'm like, who's that remind you of? And he just glanced at her, and he's like, oh my God, that's what Emma would look like if she grew up. Yeah, I started to talk to Valerie, and Valerie's like, yeah, and she was going for Miss America or Miss Universe. So any financial help she could get to offset the cost of her gown and, the travel and all the other stuff that she needed to get prepared for Miss Universe, she was really, really into it. And she also ended up being my best actress or best actor. She was extremely super over prepared, and
Yeah. So speaking of actors in your film, I've seen the film, and listeners, just so you know, the children, especially in the beginning, when they're up to their little hijinks and whatnot, they are so adorable. Every single one of them. Were those all like local children of friends, or how did you cast the children?
No, I actually went through a casting agency.
Okay.
And then the casting agent tried to charge me a percentage and them a percentage. So we kind of parted ways, but I had already casted the people. The one who plays young Dimmy, who steals the show, he was from North Carolina, and then his mother moved to West Virginia. The other kid who was his sidekick, who plays the young Marty, he is from Ohio. The girl who plays Emma is local. And the guy who played George, I don't remember who he was from, but I think he was from the other side of Pittsburgh. So nobody was local. They came through this agency.
Okay, I just assumed because it's an independent film that you'd be like rounding up friends and family and like, hey, do your kids want to do a movie? They were just so great together.
Yeah, the only one that I knew ahead of time was Marty, just because we had worked on a bunch of projects together. George and Teddy, too, who are the two knucklehead comic relief guys. Teddy, I actually worked with in politics.
Interesting.
He was one of my helpers and intern, and I always liked him. And the guy who plays George was a friend of Marty's, who was on his ghost hunting team. Marty had a ghost hunting show for a long time.
Wow.
And the guy who played George was one of the guys. They just had a certain look, and they had a chemistry together. And then we were out shooting one day, a PSA, and Billy Guerin from the Penguins was there, and he was like, hey, what are you guys shooting? And we told him, and he said, oh, you guys ever do movies? And Marty said, yeah. Well, put me in your movies. And Marty says, you got to go talk to Fred. It's his movie. So Billy Guerin, Hall of Famer from the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he played for a couple other teams too, I think Minnesota. And well, he's actually the general manager for Minnesota right now. but he actually showed up and did the hockey scene. So that's a little Easter egg for anyone who's a hockey fan.
Yeah.
And then the additional Easter egg is the woman who checks him out is actually his wife.
Oh, how fun. So tell me a little bit about Mark and Tara. You had them as makeup and special effects.
Okay.
I'm
Mark,
curious how you landed on the design and all that.
Mark was one of those two guys that helped me up in the Hollywood theater. Mark studies makeup effects from the 50s and 60s. He hates all the CGI. He likes foam monsters and foam costumes that look corny, walking up out of the ocean, and they look like Sigmund and the Sea Monster. So I knew if I was going for that kind of campy 60s look, I needed a monster that looked like that, but a little bit scary. So I looked at all these. I went online actually and looked for all these different prosthetics for some type of a sea monster or frogman or I don't even remember what that mask was called, but it's just it's a front facial prosthetic, and then Tara filled in the head. But the whole costume Mark built in his garage out of foam. He brought I found an old it was actually Toys R Us, and they were closing down, and they threw these big giant blocks of foam out for some reason. And I picked them up and threw them in my car, and I took them to him, and I'm like, "Can you work with this?" He's like, "Oh my God, like, do you know what this would cost me if I actually went out and purchased it?" So I brought him these giant sheets of foam that were about that thick, and he just pressure glued it together and would cut pieces, and then he'd sand it and finish it and painted it. And
oh my
that's how
God.
he came up with the chest piece and the arm pieces and the legs and the whole nine.
Wow, ingenuity in independent filmmaking. I love it. So let's go ahead and segue now into your writing. What was the first book that you self-published, correct?
Yes.
What was the first book that you completed?
The first one was the second and third are both KDP, which is a form of self-publishing, and I'll tell you why I went that route.
What was the first book that you completed?
My first book was Maiden Voyage, and I started that just before COVID hit. And it's a Star Trek story about Captain Pike's first command aboard the Enterprise. Of course, I can't sell it because Paramount, there's a whole story and an episode behind that. So I put it on my website, and I put it up on the public domain first. So in case there were any rights issues that came up, or suddenly they create something that's called Maiden Voyage and it's identical to the book I wrote, it's out there and it's been seen, and it has hundreds of reads. And plus there's the 100 print copies that were sold. I think I got a few left. I put it up. A friend of mine who is in a band said, "Oh, no, don't hard price anything. Put it up on your website and ask for donations." Mm-hmm. And I think probably the first 30 or 35 donations paid for the books. So that was very wise.
Yeah.
After all said and done, I was averaging like $48 a book. There's not a book out there that costs $48, so that was pretty nice. But people are generous and they try to help you out. So yeah, you're doing a good deed here. And well, some people do. Most people ignore you. But
hey, we have our copy. My husband's read it cover to cover, and he thoroughly enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. But yeah, it was an original Star Trek story. I mean, other than the Enterprise, Captain Pike #1 and Philip Boyce, all the other characters I created. Pike I took in my own direction. #1, I made her a #1, unlike Strange New Worlds, who seems to have Pike and Spock. And that's kind of, just to jump back to the movie thing again. It just seems that Hollywood is so into pandering to an audience that they've lost any type of structural integrity to the actual content. #1 is the first officer. If you're going to fill the bridge of Discovery with all female characters, it's okay to have a strong first female officer. In my book, she kicks ass, as you know. She's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
Where that story came from, I don't know. Lori asks me all the time. Sometimes she's like, I just want to look at your head. And I'm like, why? She's like, I have no idea where this stuff comes from in your brain. Like, how does your brain work? Like, where did you come up with this and this? And I'm like, I don't know. I have these, they're in my room. I have these 3 giant foam core boards, and they're little sticky pads on them. When I got an idea, I put it on there. And, when it came down to writing, especially the combat scene towards the end with the Orion scrappers, that was fairly involved. There's one whole board for that, because there's a lot of back and forth. What's going on in the Enterprise? What's going on the Solarian ship? What's going on the shuttle? Where they rescued the people, and then here's this scrapper that has, is trying to push number one because she's a woman, and to Orion, women are slave women or prostitutes. So they're getting a kick out of her commanding the Enterprise, and they don't believe her. But the whole choreography of it, and that's an interesting word, because I was talking to a friend of mine he's 75 and he's been in the writing game forever. He's wrote for national magazines in fishing and hunting, and we talked about, he asked me, like, in your stories, what's the most important part? And I told him, I'm a character generator. I can come up with 500 characters in the next 2 minutes. The choreography is the most complicated. You got 3 people doing something. How do they all come together? How does what they're doing affect what the other one's doing that affects the overall story? There's this dance that's going on in any story or any good movie where there are these different people that have these different pieces of the story. How do you get them together? Or how do you move them? How do we get that really cool scene with, Sam landing the shuttle on the Enterprise while in the middle of a battle when they're all captured on this alien ship and they don't know what the aliens are doing. So there's this choreography. Well, these certain things have to happen to make this other thing happen. And it's all movement. It's all motion, because those are the kinds of ththings I catch in movies that make me roll my eyes. Well, how'd that guy get there? How does that person know that? They never met, but they're talking friendly to each other. And it takes away the authentication between the characters. When you meet somebody for the first time, you're quiet, you're reserved, or if you're a loudmouth and you're a natural icebreaker, hey, how you doing? Blah blah blah. But I don't want my characters to ever come out of character. They evolve and they become different, or they become more than what they are. But when they first meet, they don't know each other forever. Right. That to me, that's lazy writing, and to me, that's Hollywood.
So you're working on other stuff now, which we'll get to in a moment. Have you ever thought about going back to the Star Trek world, or is there another story in you for these characters, or was that kind of a one and done for you?
No, there's another story. There's a whole bunch of stories. The problem is when you put that much effort into things. It was the same thing when I did that Barnabas character on the internet. You put so much time and effort into it. Like Barnabas was a 16-month ride. We had a fan base. We had all this other stuff, except there was no way to monetize it. So what do you do with it? If you're going to do something full time, you got to at least pay electric and gas and buy groceries and stuff like that. So I buy all kind of junk. I don't need it, but to actually make a living. And like my KDP books are selling briskly, and they're a nice second income. I'd like to get them to a point where they're the primary income. And that's what I'm going to start after the next one.
Okay, well, let's segue over to that now. So you have 2 out now in a 3-book series, correct?
In a series.
Okay, well, let's talk about it, please. Let's dive into this world and the first book and go from there.
Okay, the first book is called Olaf's Bride. I had gotten the idea for the heavy a long time ago when I was playing with a couple of different screenplay concepts. I tripped over this character reading about the life of Mary Shelley, and his God, if I forget this, I've lived with this character forever. Johannes. Anyway, he was an actual living person in the 16th century. He was an alchemist. He was an advisor to the court in Austria. He was a bit of a jack of all trades. He did all kind of things. He invented this very specific tone of blue paint that a lot of artists used and then died later, because the stuff that he actually created the blue out of ended up being a poison.
Oh my God.
But, this is the 1600s. They didn't have, USDA approved and running through all these different things. He would invent things out of berries and flowers, but he didn't know what the flowers were or whatever. Yeah. But his main thing that he was working on was the elixir vitae, the immortality elixir of life. And he believed that he had found it and created it, and he was going to trade it. And this is where the Mary Shelley part comes in, to an Austrian lord who owned a castle named Frankenstein. And this elixir was supposed to bring the dead back to life. Of course, the Baron was like, "Get out of here."
Wait, what?
So the Baron was like, "Get out of here! You don't have any elixir of life." So he
Oh.
kind of laughed at him for, "Yeah, you bring me a vial of elixir, and I'll sign over my castle." And if you've ever seen the Castle Frankenstein, it's this formidable. It's a humongous castle. It's not and this stuff exists, and this stuff happened.
Yeah.
So then he kind of lost his rep and kind of came out of favor with people, and inevitably got imprisoned by the king that he advised, because the people were calling for his blood. And
so you read about this guy,
so I read about this guy,
and you went,
thought,
I have to delve into this.
Yeah. So what happens if he had a true believer? Because we all have true believers that are by our side that are like, yeah, you can actually do this, right? His true believer is actually a little bit smarter than him, and he comes up with it, the actual elixir of life. And what he does is he decides that he is going to the original scientist was mixing animal ash and bone into this elixir. So his assistant decides he's going to use body parts from the graveyard and burn them up and use that in the elixir. And guess what? It works. But not really. So it reinvigorates dead parts and keeps people alive internally, but the external, the flesh, the bone, the external meat rots anyway. So they go on this hunt for this guy's name's Olaf. This is who I made up, Ansel Olaf. He's the made up fictional assistant who actually worked it out. So to wrap this, where this is going in about,
I was just saying, don't give it all away. You want people to buy the book.
Yeah. He travels through time, through 1600s, 1700s. He eventually ends up in America. And basically what he does, he hits small towns, he loots and plunders them. So he has a way of living. He has a means to exist. That goes back to those details we were talking about before. Well, how's this guy doing all this? He doesn't have any money. Well, he hits these little towns, he plunders them. And he's going mad the whole time because he's lived through multiple centuries, but he's keeping himself alive on this elixir. So he ends up in the Old West in the 1880s, and he comes across this husband and wife, and he decides he's going to do what he does because he's a body harvester. He harvests body parts, and he gives them this elixir to try. He keeps coming up with new ways to improve it.
Sounds wildly fascinating. Oh my God.
Yeah, but they keep failing, and so they become these little zombies called ash tokers who get off on the smell of the burning flesh. So they're basically human beings because he's tried this on living human beings to see how it works. Ooh. And basically what they do is they become these little creepy black creatures that skitter. Mm-hmm. The nickname that these guys have given them are ash tokers. So they hit this little town outside of Carson City, and where this cowboy and his wife lives, and he's trying to give the wife this because they're having a problem having a child. So he's got this elixir, of course, to get her pregnant. But he kills them and steals their money and just goes on down the road. Or does he?
Yeah. How do we end up with a bride here? I don't want you to give it away, but
I'm not. Yeah, I can't, because that's like an aha moment in the book.
Okay.
So the cowboy lives somehow, and we don't know why or how, but we find out later in the book how and why.
Is he book 2?
No, he's still in the first book.
But is he your character for book 2? Is that what that is?
Yeah, the Ballad of Colt Sturgis is
that's him.
About him. Yeah.
Oh.
So to tie up the first book, he's tracking these people. There are these Vietnam commandos who have come across these vampire-like creatures that are tied to Olaf. So they are tracking these people into 1978 to this town named Kinston.
Okay.
So the first story is about these 6 people that meet out of survival.
Okay.
They are fighting for their lives against Olaf and his little ash tokers. He has killer clowns because he did this experiment on these 2 twins called Frick and Frack. And Frick talks, Frack finishes the sentence. So they talk back and forth in the book, and that's how they talk to one another. They finish each other's thoughts.
That's fun.
And they're kind of the R2D2 and C3PO of the series. They're in every book.
Okay.
And the epilogue of every book, whether you see them, if they're totally involved in the story, or you don't see them at all, they're the epilogue. They bridge to the next story. So Frick and Frack like clowns, so they decided to dress some of these failed experiments up like clowns. So there's killer clowns. There's all these freaky things that are in there. The first one is closest to horror and action adventure.
Okay.
Because it's kind of a modern day spin on the whole Frankenstein thing.
And then the second one.
So these 6 people meet out of survival, and then the story ends. And I can't tell you which ones survive and go in their own way, but 5 years have passed.
Okay.
And the town has been bulldozed by the government, and they don't want anyone in that town because they don't know what actually happened in there. So they're kind of covering it up. So Colt and one of the other people who survive are living on his ranch in the Allegheny Mountains in Pennsylvania. And Colt decides that it's time for a reunion just to catch up. So he invites the other 4 to his cabin for the weekend. So they come to the cabin, and it's 5 years later, and we know time changes people, but they're all off. They're all just acting really fucking weird. And Colt notices it right away. And he's like, I don't know what's going on here, but something happened. Something happened from when we saw them last and now. So the second one is more about coming together as friendships and overcoming perceptions and expectations that we have of other people. Because sometimes we part people, and because you say, oh, I've known John for 20 years. I could not see him for 10 years, and we get together and it's like he never left. And then there are other people who are like, man, I saw them like 6 months ago. What happened to them? They're completely different.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an exploration of the characters.
Okay.
And what they mean to each other, how they interact, how that choreography comes to play in real life. How does it all work? Of course, we have a heavy. His name's Caleb Blackburn, and he wants Colt for some reason.
Okay.
And we don't know why, but he approaches Colt at this VFW Halloween dance, and he comes up to Colt, and there's something going on in the background because I used my my little half zombie and my killer clowns and all the first one. And the other thing I always was fascinated by shadow kids. So I have shadow kids in this one.
Oh, wow.
And how they operate, how they work is cool.
This one doesn't lean into horror though as much as the first book?
No. Yeah, this is very little horror.
Okay.
The story's propelled by horror, but it's not what it's about.
Okay. And these two are available now.
They're available right now on Amazon.com.
Okay.
Olaf's Bride and the Ballad of Colt Sturgis. Selling really well, but I only have 10 reviews. So if anybody's listening who jumps out to buy the book, please go and review it if you like it or don't like it. Like 2 reviews on Amazon can raise your rankings 1 million. Seriously.
Oh, that's awesome. So listeners, get on that. But I'm interested though in the forthcoming.
Yeah, the next one is called Gods and Necromancy.
Yeah, I saw that title and I went, ooh, okay.
One of our characters has powers. She has abilities. And you meet her early on in the first book. And she has unlocked her powers. The powers I gave her, fucking cool. I can't stand it. By the end of the Ballad of Colt Sturgis, she is probably my favorite character.
You're so funny. You're like, I write awesome shit.
I do.
People need to be reading
stuff.
it.
You know why? Because for 57 years, everything I wrote, I'm like, eh. I wrote the Star Trek book. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Olaf was awesome and fun to write. When I was finished with Ballad, I was like, I don't know where to go. This is the best I can possibly do. I couldn't be happier. This stretches every imaginative bone that I've ever had in my entire life. It's got shadow people. It's got vampires that morph into gargoyles. It's got this guy who you have no clue what he's up against. So there's all this stuff going on. And then you've got these characters who are coming into their own. Like Kat has discovered, oh my God, I have these powers. But she doesn't know what's going on because she's walking around and she's having these orgasms every time she breathes. And she's like, what the hell is going on? I don't even know. The wind blows, I'm having an orgasm. And she doesn't quite know what's happening. And this is kind of the sort of, I delve a little into the mysticism in this one with, the sacral energy and how the sacral energy moves into the other energy zones. It's really freaking cool. And I was really excited when this happened. And the ending, because I have some Rabid fans, they were like, I cannot believe, when's God's coming out? And I'm like,
that was my next question.
I'm working on it now. Because they were like, I can't believe you left me at the end of that story the way you left me. And now I have to wait. And I'm like, well, you have to wait.
How dare you, sir?
Oh, it's like it's a cliffhanger. It's a better cliffhanger than Empire Strikes Back. I'm telling, I guarantee it. If you read both of them, when you get at the end of a ballad, you'll be like, I can't believe he did this.
Oh, well, now maybe I'll wait to read it until I know God's is coming. When can we expect that one seriously, though?
God's is a work in patience. It's humongous.
Okay.
I am about to write the ending because there's so much going on, and I lay awake at night, and the ending is so effing cool. I can't wait for it. So I'm going to do something I've never done before because I write very chronological. I write chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, because things happen. Like I don't have things worked out. I don't know what's going to happen. I have a general idea, and then the characters kind of walk me through what's happening. They dictate to me what's happening.
Sure.
This one is structured. God's is, I know what happens in every single chapter from the beginning to the end, maybe because I took a little bit of time, because I wrote those 3 books in 17 months. So Star Trek was the longest. That took almost a year. And then Olaf was about 6 or 7 months. Ballad, as much as I love it, didn't take very long. It's the revision process. Because I write by stream of thought. So usually when I go into revision, it's like, oh my God, this is pure shit. I can't believe I said this. But I wrote the same 2 sentences back to back. And I don't know how other writers write, but revision is like going to the dentist and they're pulling all of your teeth with no Novocaine.
So you say it's humongous. Does that mean you're toying with the idea of maybe releasing it in volumes, like separate?
Nope, it's book 3.
It is going to be 1 book. Okay.
It's 1 book. It's just probably going to be as big as the first 2.
Okay.
Because the prologue section, the first section, chapter 1 and chapter 2 are probably, I don't recall, I think 60 pages. This is 37 chapters.
Wow. But you said it's not going to end there necessarily. The story of these people.
I can't say that.
Okay. Don't give it away.
I don't want to tease that. I will say this: you're going to meet a brand new character that's going to stick around.
Oh, I like that.
I kind of got this idea with the last one just because of the stuff that one of the characters is tinkering in. That's where the necromancy comes into. The premise, the main premise of the story is there are 2 natural orders of things. There is birth and there's death. Everything else happens. But you can't tinker with either one of those or it causes shit to happen. So there's this new character named Robert Cloverdale, and he's very Vincent Price-ish. He is I don't want to say a bounty hunter for the afterlife, but there are rules for the afterlife, and he makes sure that you abide by them. So we're gonna have a little ghost action in this one. There aren't any monsters per se in this. The monster is man and religious fanaticism.
Ooh, okay. This is so cool. Each book sounds like it's got its own lane, like the genre, material of it, but yet all the same stuff, like the people, and it ties together.
Yep.
I'm so fascinated. I can't wait to dive in.
And my characters are really fun. And I love Cloverdale. He's funny because he even talks like Vincent Price. Because like the one thing in Olaf, anybody who meets Colt Sturgis, even though he's 100 years old in Olaf, they tell him how much he looks like Sam Elliott. Because when I wrote Colt, I've pictured Sam Elliott. But this is the 70s, so I have to go with the what is it, Lifeguard? Was that the movie he was in? Where he was real studly with his brown hair and the big brown mustache.
He's always been studly.
Yeah, exactly. So everybody, the people say, hey, anybody ever tell you look like Sam Elliott? And that's kind of like the going joke in the book. So Robert Cloverdale is going to kind of he's kind of looks like Vincent Price. And the funny part of it, and I'm going to write this into towards the end, one of the characters says, hey, anybody ever tell you look like a creature feature guy, Vincent Price? Right. So there's going to be, because one thing that you'll notice, and you may have noticed this in the Star Trek book, I do not describe what my characters look like. That's up to the reader. I don't want to, when I read, if they tell me, oh yeah, George had a big giant mustache, I don't see George with a mustache, so it screws it up for me. I don't want to describe him, and it's also fluid when it comes to are they white? Are they black? Are they yellow? Are they red? Are they orange? It doesn't matter. You make them whatever you want them to be.
I like it. So you did mention Amazon, also Barnes and Noble online.
Yep.
Okay. And is there anywhere else that these can be purchased? You have a website. If you want to give everybody.
But all that does is that just dumps you into Amazon.
Oh, that's fine. What's your website where people can find you?
FredTerling.com.
That's very straightforward. Okay. So do you have any other projects forthcoming that you want to mention? Any other social media where people can come and see what you do and get in touch with you? This would be the time.
Yeah, they can hit me at Terling Author, either on Facebook or Instagram. I'm on Instagram a lot. I took Facebook off my phone because I got sick of the people. And I also got sick. A funny thing happens when you go out there and you hit a little bit of success. You get hammered with, I can help you even more. And the next thing you know, you have 2,000 followers and they're all bots. And you get 75 messages a day. Hey, me love you long time. Come to my website and see me naked. So I kind of laid off of social media as a legitimate marketplace at this point. With that being said, we're doing okay. As soon as Gods is done, there's going to be a brief hiatus. So anybody who likes Cloverdale, I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait for that one to see where he comes next, or some of the other characters land. But I'm going to get out and about. So I'm going to do some independent booksellers. I'm probably going to head out your way eventually. I'm going to do sort of an East Coast swing first. I'm going to do a couple of bookstores in New York City. I'd like to get into the Strand. I don't know what their setup is. I just have to negotiate that with them. I'm going to do a free book drop in Central Park. Then I'm going to do Kramer's Bookstore, which is one of the largest indie bookstores in DC. Down in a very LGBTQ community. Ballad is very LGBTQ friendly. And then I'm probably going to hit Annapolis. And I have some friends that are willing to put me up down in Florida way. So I'm probably just going to do, I don't know, either early 2025, just get out and about and do only marketing and get out and meet. When I do book signings, sales go through the roof. I did just a small one here at a Halloween party. I ran out of Olaf. And I had 2-3 cases with me. It went crazy. They've sold crazy.
Yeah, you need to be getting out. It sounds like, for sure.
And and come out your way with that bookstore you told me about.
Yeah.
And then just plan to hit a couple of bookstores out that way. I met a friend through a writing group on Instagram. She does half price books every weekend. She makes a killing, an absolute killing. And she goes to all the local half price books, sets up her table, sells books, and does the and does really, really well. So I'm looking to get out in 2020 or 2025. Plus, come out and see you. You can show me around, show me good places to eat, hang out, and I'll pester you for a day or two.
You got to get out and meet the fans. Is what you got to do.
Well, you get out and create fans. It's like I've sent Olaf to a bunch of people just unsolicited, friends who are in the entertainment field that are in the entertainment field. They're not just, they're players with just, an inscription. Say, hey, if you dig it, check out Ballad of Colt Sturgis and go up from there. It is interesting. Some people came into the signing, they had the hardbacks.
Really?
I only buy hardcovers, but yeah, the hardcovers of these books look amazing.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, they can see the artwork. Yeah, if they go to Amazon and check it out, or your website has photos as well. I'm just curious, one last thing before I let you go. Are you interested at all in turning these new books into film or television or an Amazon series or, anything like that visually? Do you want to see that happen with this story and these people?
No.
Nothing? No?
I mean, if somebody approached me and said, here's a gigantic check and you can go buy that villa you've been looking at in Greece for, the past 20 years. But I wouldn't want involved in it because they're going to screw it up. Nobody does anything right with books. I liked The First Stand. I thought Dreamcatcher was fantastic. Why they changed the ending from the book, only Hollywood knows. I don't see a lot of film books that I've read I would still love to see Vittoria the Vampire made. That was my favorite Anne Rice book. It was just so cool. I don't know. I thought they did it. I thought they did a good job on American Splendor. And I'm actually friends with Joyce, who's Harvey Picar's wife, and she is one of the main characters in American Splendor. She actually invited me up when they did the park dedication in Cleveland for Harvey, so I got to go up there and say a few words. It was one of the highlights of my life. But yeah, she has the books. Ed Sanchez from Blair Witch Project has the books. Mark Damon from Pretty Reckless, the bass player from Pretty Reckless, has the books. There's a couple of people that I know who have bands out in Los Angeles that have the books.
If word got around and somebody got a hold of it and said, hey, we want to do this as a 10-episode Netflix or whatever, the price would have to be right, is what you're saying. You're not just going to go, yeah, sure, whatever.
Give me a gigantic check, put me down as the author of the novels, because that would make my sales explode, because everybody would want to go read the books.
Oh, for sure.
Based on the book written by Fred Terling, I don't want to write the screenplay. I don't want to be on set. I don't want to cast. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Give me a big giant check. Give me credits as the writer of the book on the official movie website. Put a link to my Amazon, and we'll call it a day.
Call it a day. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
Talking about your projects and your writing. Anybody out there listening, if you're wanting to dive into these books, again, if you want to tell everybody, sir, where they can find you and find your books.
Yeah, if you go to amazon.com/author/Fred Terling. But if you go to my website, Fred Terling, FredTerling, just like Sterling, no S.com, everything's up there. I mean, if you heard something about the Star Trek novel and you're intrigued, I still do have a few copies left. You'll get them signed and stamped. I only stamp in person, but for the Star Trek books, I'll stamp them. I have a little embossing seal that says from the library of the author. You can only get that seal if it's in person. But if somebody wants to buy you don't buy it. You just give me a donation. I'll put it in an envelope and send it to you. Whatever your donation is, throw an extra $5 in there so it covers the shipping. And I'll send you the Star Trek book. There's a form on there. You just fill it out. As for the other books, they're on Amazon. Click the Amazon link. You'll go there. I will possibly promote Barnes & Noble's more.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And listeners, check out those links, buy those books. And in 2025, hopefully Fred Terling will be headed your way. So keep an eye out. And we want to thank you all for listening. This was a Patreon exclusive episode. So thank you so much for being a member. And until next time, goodbye. Hey listeners, Movie Miss here, saying we know you have a lot of options when it comes to podcasts, so we want to thank you so much for listening to ours. Please make sure to find us on our socials and join us, be part of our bad movie conversations. We want to chat with you. We're on Facebook with an official page, as well as a Let's Talk Turkeys discussion group, where you can talk with other like-minded individuals who like bad movies. We're on Instagram at Let's Talk Turkeys. Our Twitter handle is at Gobble Podcast. That's GOBBLEPODCAST. And of course, you can always email us direct. We would love to get suggestions from you of movies you would like us to cover. If you want to be a guest on the show, we would love that. So directly, that's Let's Talk Turkeys, all one word, at yahoo.com.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.